Upstar TV.
Hi, I'm Marielle with Upstar TV. Please stick with us while we attempt to reinvent our lives.
You are now watching Upstar Records TV.
Hello, I'm your host, Zaria, and this is Upstar TV. Today we're talking about the idea of school-to-prison pipelines and closing Juvenile Hall in San Francisco. Let's go around first and introduce ourselves, starting with our guest, Dawn from Sunset Youth Services.
Hi, I'm Dawn Stueckle, and I am a co-founder and director of Sunset Youth Services, and super excited to be here with you guys today. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm Zaria. I'm your host for today, and I'm also a producer for Upstar TV, and I'll let my fellow peers introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Maisie, and I'm also a producer for Upstar.
My name's Aaliyah. I'm also a producer for Upstar.
And my name is Seaman. I'm also a producer for Upstar.
Okay, I'm gonna start off by asking a couple of questions. Can you explain your work in closing Juvenile Hall in San Francisco?
We've been working in San Francisco and working primarily with young people in the juvenile and the adult criminal justice system for almost 30 years. And one of the things that we learned early on, just essentially we got into this system because we just followed kids that we cared about into the system. And so when they got arrested or things happened, we just went where they were, right? Because it just made sense for us to support people wherever they were. And in the process, what we started to notice was how much the system was harmful to young people that were in the system. It was harmful to their families. And that once you entered into the system, it was really difficult to successfully get out of the system again. And that felt to me and to our team, it just started feeling like a very clear sort of cycle that perpetuates sort of young people going from the juvenile system into the adult prison and jail system and kind of just being stuck in that trap.
I agree. Another one of my questions that I have for you is, do you think that young people have a voice in how to change the system?
Well, I think that young people do not have as much voice as they should have. And part of what we're doing right now is trying to create avenues for that to happen. So I didn't answer my last question very fully. So let me just give you an idea. So for people who don't know, last year, there was a successful vote at the Board of Supervisors level in San Francisco to close down Juvenile Hall. And so that became a very clear mandate and work that we had been involved with along with other community-based organizations in San Francisco for many years. And so when that happened, that sort of jump-started this other work of what does it look like to close down Juvenile Hall? What takes the place, right? What systems or what steps in, right? When you take something out, what goes in its place? And so that system, that process is what's happening right now, that planning process. And what we're trying to do is figure out the most effective way to continue to have youth voice and to grow the youth voice. Some of the things that have happened currently around youth voice is that there have been some focus groups citywide that have been held by organizations and by some of the commissions in the city. There's also a process right now called it's actually the Board of Supervisors Closed Juvenile Hall Committee, and there is youth voice seated. Part of what we advocated for was to have to have youth seats on that committee. So there are 2 young people on that committee, and they are young people who were arrested and went to juvenile hall, have spent time in juvenile hall, and so are very firsthand experience with that system. And then as this planning process moves along, one of the things we did last year is we built in some funding to purchase gift cards so that we can, as a community, we can ask more youth to participate in meaningful ways. So there's a group called the Juvenile Justice Juvenile Justice Providers Association, the JJPA. I co-chair this group, and there's about 25 organizations that, like Sunset Youth Services, work within and support kids and families in the system. And so we are doing our best as that group of people to provide meaningful opportunities for young people to give input into what this looks like moving forward, particularly young people who have had their own personal experiences with the system, so that they're speaking from what they experienced and being able to sort of help dream with us about what would be better. What could it look like to do this right?
Awesome. Now I'd like to open up to my co-producers. Does anyone want to ask something we haven't yet?
So this one, feel free to ask for clarity. I realize it's not a super clear question, but what ultimately led to juvenile hall's closure? Like, what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
That's a great question. And like I said before, this was a process for a lot of us for a lot of years, but ultimately there was kind of a straw that broke the camel's back. And that was when we started to really show the city, the reduction in youth crime and violence actually is key. And youth crime and violence is down not just in San Francisco, but actually in all of California and across the country. So there's a reduction in youth crime. And so I actually wrote down some stats here. So this is a document that we've been working on and that we've been using to speak to politicians about what we're doing. So I brought some information for you guys as well. So 65% less referrals to juvenile probation during the 2009 to 2019. Okay, so during that 10-year period of time, there was 65% less young people entering into that system. However, there was a 204% cost increase to keeping the system open. So 65% less kids, but 204% increase to how much it costs to keep the facility open. The cost per youth for locking young people up in San Francisco is $814,000 a year to lock a young person up. So just think about that. You get a bed next to a metal toilet in a jail cell, and it's at $814,000 a year. That includes, obviously, all the expenses, right? There's a building bond because that building was built not that long ago. So the city went into debt to build the building. So they're still servicing that bond. It's all the staffing, it's all the counselors, it's they call the guards at juvenile hall counselors. So it's everything, right? It's the nurses, it's the school, it's everything all together. But that's a huge, huge amount of money.
Can you say that amount one more time?
$814,000 a year for one kid.
That's more than my college tuition.
Exactly our point. What we've been saying, what we are advocating for is actually taking this money and doing a better job of investing in young people and families. What we've been saying is we could pay for 4 years of college for all these kids. Like this is such bad, regardless of where you stand on crime and punishment and law and order, this is just bad finance. Like Nobody's getting their money's worth out of this. And it is disproportionately affecting, as you guys know, it's disproportionately affecting young people of color. So the other stats I brought in for you guys, which you guys might already know this stuff because y'all are on your business. I know that already. But 59% of the young people that have cases at juvenile hall are African American, but 5% of the young people in San Francisco are African American. So 5% of San Francisco's total youth population is African American Black, but 59% of the young people locked up at juvenile hall or arrested are Black. Okay. Latinx, there's 26% of Latinx young people and 22% of the population. So that's actually pretty close, right? Like, doesn't mean I'm not supporting it, but I'm just saying it's more proportionate, at least. For Asians, there's 3% of the population at juvenile hall is Asian, but 27% of San Francisco's young people are Asian. So of the 27%, only 3% have contact with juvenile hall. And white, 6% of the population is white, but 6% of but 36% of young people in San Francisco are white. So you can see that this disproportionate, once again, it's disproportionately affecting and targeting young people of color and families of color that are being ripped apart. And I strongly feel that, situations where the same behavior happens, one is with a Black kid and one is with a white kid, that is going to be very different consequences, very different results. So yeah, I have a bunch more statistics, but you guys have questions to ask, so I don't want to keep going unless it fits with something you are asking.
Okay. Another question is, how can we put more funds into schools for kids to excel in the work they're doing, or like better themselves, instead of like putting that money into the juvenile systems or into policing in general?
Yeah, so part of what we're advocating for in closing juvenile hall and in changing the entire juvenile probation system is that we can do all of the things that need to be done in a much healthier and holistic healing way for young people and families, and for way cheaper. So, and then what we're proposing is that money gets reinvested in ways that are healthy and help young people and their families thrive. So that means school opportunities, increasing school opportunities even to be more individualized, so that young people can actually, not everybody wants to go to college. A lot of kids want to, and a lot of kids want to but don't feel like they can. A lot of kids don't want to but feel like they have to, right? So there's lots of different ways for schools to be giving young people what they need in order for them to be able to pick and choose and have the opportunities that their peers would have. We're talking about reinvesting in community-based alternatives. So things such as Sunset Youth Services, right? Things that offer opportunities for young people to make music, to make TV shows, to learn and grow and have a voice and have a platform for that voice to actually be heard. We're looking at really investing in families. Like, one of the things we talked about is if you took some of this money and actually gave families a monthly stipend to just survive in San Francisco, right? To just pay the rent, pay the bills, and just be able to keep their head above water, that would make a huge difference for a lot of families in whether they can actually afford to stay. And we know that a lot of families are leaving San Francisco, and you can't have a city without families.
Okay. That was nice. That was nice. So, you feel me? You already know me as Team, and I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, can you give us an idea of what kind of intricate system will replace juvenile hall? Because kids who break the law shouldn't blame anybody but themselves, and justice must be upheld in every situation. So, what is your thoughts about that?
So I will say, what we're creating doesn't actually give a pass, right? It's not saying that people shouldn't be held responsibility. We all believe that there is personal responsibility. We also believe that the system that is in place right now is based on a system that was created years and years and years and years ago, right? Before we understood neuroscience, before we understood adolescent brain development, before we understood that there's no such thing as a bad person, right? That the question the question is about what has been done to people, right? So we were just having a conversation the other day. I'm a left-handed person. Are any of you guys left-handed? So I was just having this conversation the other day with my dad about how people used to think left-handed people were evil. And so they would actually break their left hand so that they would have to be forced to write with their right hand, or they would put like these like devil dolls on their desk and try to like stigmatize them, right, for being left-handed. There are things and now we go, well, that's ridiculous, right? But the systems that we have in place around crime and punishment and locking up children is also based on very out-of-date ideas and things that we would no longer say that we subscribe to as a society. But these systems are in place and they're so entrenched and so baked in to everything that we've done that we just kind of go with it, right? And it takes people standing up and saying, hey, you're harming kids, you're harming families, you're harming our city, right? This is not the way to do it. We have to actually, systems are put in place by people. They're not untouchable, right? Defund police is a real thing and it's actually getting traction and it's really important. It doesn't mean there won't be a police department. It means the police department will be right-sized, right? Their budget will be right-sized, and money that is going right now to police for doing things that they shouldn't even really be doing will ultimately, hopefully, be diverted to social workers and to people who could come into a situation and de-escalate a situation and get people what they need. The system that we're looking at is community-based, small placement type of things. So like, first and foremost, we want to keep kids at home if at all possible. Kids don't need to be taken out of their homes as quickly or as liberally as they are. Families need to be supported. So if there's a family that is struggling for some reason, then that family needs to be wrapped with services and financial aid and whatever it is that is needed for them to keep their young person at home. And then if for some reason a young person really can't be at home and there are reasons why that happens, right? Then we want to have a variety of different places where young people can be held. And some of those will be secure places and some of them will not be secure places, but we're also not looking at group homes. We're looking at family type homes where one or two young people can stay for a short period of time in a family setting, in a home that looks just like everybody else's house on the block and right? Like that's here, connected, and that's like wrapped with loving adults and relationships and opportunities and mentors and all kinds of things that we all need in order for us to get back on our feet and to try something new. And so the question that we're asking is, and this is where I feel like the voice of young people is really key, right? Is what can you imagine that looking like? Tomorrow, there's a group of us that are doing a virtual tour of some of this stuff that's been changed and set up in New York City, where they've actually set up some small houses where young people get housed for short periods of time while different things are being worked out and plans are being made. So we're going to take a virtual tour since COVID, and take a look at what they're doing and ask questions and see if there's some stuff there that might be applicable in our setting. Because San Francisco will be the very first city in the country to have no juvenile hall. And part of this legislation also said, not only are we not going to have juvenile hall, we're not going to lock young people up with adults, right? San Francisco already has a lot of controls around trying young people as adults, and it's very difficult to do that in San Francisco. There are cities where that happens pretty regularly, but San Francisco is not one of them, because advocates like us and others are watching that stuff and fighting to get things into place to protect kids. And that it also says kids cannot be sent out of county to other jails. So just because we don't have a juvenile probation to lock kids up in doesn't mean that you guys, that like you guys and your friends can now be sent to like LA to get locked up in their system. We're keeping our kids local. We're trying to have community-based, healing, focused, safe spaces for people to get what they need and then go back home. So that is if they even have to be out of their home at all.
Wow, he really sold me on that one. Like, because you when you saying that, right? You were just weaving a path, like as if you were weaving a basket, And I'm seeing it all unfold. Like, yeah, I'm convinced. Yeah, that honest, yeah, juvenile justice. Like, I already knew that the juvenile justice system needed to be shut down. You feel me? But now I'm really a believer right now. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I know somebody has a question, but let me tell you guys one interesting thing that I think is worth noting. And that is, right now, the kids that are locked up are typically locked up on technical violations, meaning they're up there because of a warrant or because they failed a placement. That means they ran from a group home or a foster home or some situation. They're not up there for violence. So only one third of 2020 arrests were for anything that involved any level of violence. So one thing we've heard from a lot of people is, are you going to close down jail and all these like dangerous, murderous kids are going to be on the streets? No, that's not even who's in there. It's people who are in there on very, very much less serious offenses than what people naturally think. What does it look like to address harm, right? So if you rob somebody, you have done harm to your community. It's also harmful for you to do those things, right? Like, as the offender, I'm also being harmed in that. So we're not saying that nobody has to be held accountable. What we're saying is there are ways to hold people accountable that don't further damage them and further send them on this road of destruction and harm. There are ways for us to hold people accountable in a way that feels safe for them and safe for the person that they harm, and brings community restoration and reunification.
Wow. I have another question. What are alternative ways to end the racial disparity among the school system far as reinforcement methods?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Can you reword that for me?
So I'm saying, like, what are, like, okay, so you know how a lot of the times where kids in school, let's say they go, a lot of times get sent to juvenile hall due to, like, for breaking, like, not talking back at adults or acting out in class, and they get sent to juvenile hall. And it's kind of like, okay, what are, like, alternative ways? Could there be more counseling in school as far as, like, better ways to resolve conflict than just resulting to punishment,
Yes. So absolutely. And one of the things that we are advocating for in the process of moving money around is investing more deeply in restorative practices. So a lot of the SFUSD has bought into restorative practices, meaning that when somebody does something that maybe you guys have seen this in your schools, that there's a restorative circle, that there's there's a process for keeping people whole in the community. But what's happened is that the school district and the school board said, yes, we want to do this. We want this at all the schools. We were involved in a lot of advocacy. We had young people older than you guys now who advocated for reducing suspensions, because one of the things that was happening was a lot of Black and brown kids were being suspended over really ridiculous things. And that was playing into this whole idea. But it hasn't been funded. So for schools to do it, there needs to be some money there so that like the wellness centers and other organizations can actually do a good job of practicing restorative practices, of keeping young people in the community and keeping the community whole, and redressing harm that's happened because of a situation, right? And also giving teachers and administrators and folks at the school level enough training and enough understanding to be able to handle situations without playing the power card, right? What happens with adults a lot of times is that if a young person's yelling at them, they feel disrespected, and then they respond in a way that's escalated because they feel disrespected, rather than recognizing that something is going on with this young person that's upsetting them, and I'm the adult in the situation. It's okay for me to take a breath, let everybody cool down, and then we can have a conversation calmly, because that also teaches young people how to approach situations. And maybe they will start to learn that yelling at people isn't actually the best way for me to get what I want, right? But we have to learn those things, and adults need to be patient as people start to learn and grow together in kind of learning this new dance that they're going to do and how they're going to get their needs met.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Dawn. It was a pleasure. And this has been another important conversation. You can find this episode and other Upstar TV episodes on YouTube and Channel 29 every Friday night at 7:30. Take care of yourself and stay healthy. And thank you for coming in today and join us on our episode.
Thanks so much, you guys. Keep up the good work.